This is Don Mazzella. We're into the new year, and we have with us someone I think we're all interested in, Lauren Winans. She is an HR expert. She has her own company, but more importantly, she has some good ideas of how employers can deal with this mass resignations that in November apparently reached record levels. So, without further ado, Lauren, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Dawn. Happy to be here.
Okay, Lauren, tell us first a little bit about your personal background, then a little bit about your company, and finally your website.
Sure. So I'm a human resources professional. I have been in various corporate HR roles in my career. I've worked at a variety of large employers, but just started my own business, my own small business 2 years ago. So I am focused on human resources consulting. So we are mainly handling projects as it relates to benefits, compensation, any sort of HR issue, project management that comes into play for employees and employers that are trying to create more best places to work. And so the name of my firm is Next Level Benefits. You can find out more information about what we do and who we are on our website, www.nlbenefits.com, NL like next level, nlbenefits.com.
Okay. Well, on that note, I'm going to ask you a question. Everybody talks about the people that are leaving, but what about the employer that they leave? What are some of the things that they can do or should do or perhaps consider when employee does leave?
I think that's a really great question because it's inevitable that employees are going to leave. There isn't, the same mentality these days around, loyalty within the workplace because ultimately times have changed and employees are looking for positions that fit within their lifestyle, that meet their needs. And so employers can be proactive about that in terms of coming up with compensation and benefits packages that make the most sense for the employees that they have on their staff. It's a great way to retain employees when they feel like they're definitely being compensated for the right rate and for their value, and as well as being offered benefits that are going to be attractive to them and their families. But I think also creating a culture and a workplace environment in which people want to work is something that is worth spending time on. So, what I see a lot of our clients and a lot of other employers doing is they're really focused on the employee experience right now. And so, that is, when you have someone who leaves the organization, leaves your company, leaves your business, it's a great opportunity to step back and kind of see, what was the reason that they left? Was it an external reason that was totally out of your control? Or was it an internal reason, something that you do have control over, whether it be, creating a better environment, paying people better, offering better benefits. So all of these things are something that are worth really assessing. And even if you don't have a turnover problem right now, you might, and you will likely in the future. So this is a process and a opportunity to continue to assess over time annually and be getting feedback from the employees that are leaving so you can properly address any issues or concerns that might be happening within your employee staff population.
That dreaded exit interview. Are they really as valuable as people think they are? Because if you're leaving, you don't want to blast the company because somebody's going to ask for a reference. But do people really give you the reasons that the real reasons they leave?
I find yes, they do. And I think if you make it easy for them, right? If you create like maybe categories, almost like a multiple choice, here, choose what reason, you're leaving. I think they're much more apt to fill something out for you or be, vague in their reasoning so that you can at least get an idea of where to start your digging and where to start assessing or maybe making some changes But I agree with you. They're not necessarily going to be that open with, telling you exact reasons or exact names of people that might be the reasons that they're leaving. But, I am finding that people are definitely willing to at least give you a few minutes of their time to share, hey, like, I'm actually leaving because I'm not making as much money as I could at this other company, or I'm not happy here because the environment is stressful, or whatever the case may be. They are willing to give you at least some indication of the reason that they might be leaving.
Well, I've been working a long time, a lot longer than you. But if people ask me where I worked, I always say NBC News and McGraw-Hill, and both of them. I just ran into someone this weekend who worked at McGraw-Hill 30 years ago, and I worked at McGraw-Hill 30 years ago, and we bonded because we worked at McGraw-Hill, which was a unique organization. People do not have seem to have that land of saying, I work for this company. I don't care what the company is, even Apple.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, I agree with you. Yeah, it's not something that you see is common, these days. I think it's more of I worked in that field or I worked in that industry, not necessarily I worked for that employer or I worked for that company. And I think now that we're in an era where there's a lot more remote and virtual work being done, it's harder to create those bonds with your fellow coworkers and your employees in the same way that you could. I know that there's a lot of small businesses out there that are still working on site and have the opportunity to build bonds, but there's also just so many things that have changed in our society with social distancing and masking and, all that kind of comes with, we're not going to happy hours anymore, right? We're not
hmm,
getting a chance to get to know each other on a different level. And I think that is a challenge that we need to overcome as employees, as coworkers, and any way that a company can help facilitate, whether it's creating an environment of inclusion and, an environment that you want to be proud of and brag about that you're working for. I think, that's a great way to kind of start getting employees in that space where they're able to bond again over something, because right now we don't have a lot to bond about.
hmm. But my question is, how they talked about all the perks you had when you worked for these tech companies. You had the ping pong and all that, and now you're working at home. Yet it seems, has there been a change in that as well?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. The majority of the on-site perks that kind of existed, 2+ years ago, those are one of the first budget cuts that occurred at the beginning of the pandemic when we realized, hey, I'm not so sure we're going to be going back to the office anytime soon. So, those perks have been replaced with a lot of other, types of services and benefits and, maybe things to consider, regardless of what size company you are. You can replace, on-site perks like, ping pong, snacks, free drinks, with memberships to Grubhub or DoorDash to have your lunch delivered to you maybe once a week, or, replace it with access to mental health services that are virtual and online, or maybe even a Netflix subscription. So there's lots of different things that companies can do to think outside the box. And some of those same tech companies that were offering, on-site perks before are coming up with new creative opportunities that are more virtual in nature.
Oh, your website again for people?
It is www.nlbenefits.com. That's next level, nlbenefits.com.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this question. You know, he who's closest to the king uh, gets ahead. And what I've seen and people have told me over the last 6 months is people who have gotten into the office earlier seem to have had advantages. Are you seeing that? And how do you overcome it as you sit out there?
You know, That's such a great perspective, and it's something that I don't think is the case at every company, but I do think that those who are present and able to be present with their leaders in more, opportunities than not, whether it's daily or whether it's a couple of times a week, I do think that those folks are able to build the relationship and the bonds that are necessary to be considered for career advancement and for promotions. And I think that is something that all of us who might be working virtually do need to keep in mind, that there is a trade-off that occurs, right? So when you're working from home, you get the benefits of not leaving the house, not having a commute, maybe wearing comfortable pants all day. But you don't, the trade-off is that, you might not necessarily get, your career progression might be slowed because of that. And if that's something that you're okay with, because you want the flexibility, then it's worth the trade-off. If that's something that you're not okay with, you do need to consider which opportunities make the most sense for you to get back into the office or to get a little more face time with your leaders.
Mm. But let me ask you, as a leader, I would want people that are go-getters, that want my job.
Mhm.
But if a person, male or female, stays home and says, "Well, I'm content," he's not the person I want on my team.
That's a good point. I think though that, my argument to that would be that, there are, and not every organization, not every company is going to be like this, but there are a lot of organizations that, leading remotely and leading from home is something that, you can do depending upon what your demographic is, and who your employees are and what your team looks like and how they're dispersed, if they're dispersed across the country or not. But, there are circumstances, and I agree with you, where, on-site leadership and people who want to be there daily because the teams are there, is probably, a definite plus when it comes to, career advancement. But I do think it's based upon industry and company. There are certain companies that, naturally based upon what they do are dispersed across the country and remote leadership is possible. So it's just a matter of what is the best fit for each individual organization and what makes the most sense for, each business owner or executive leader.
Mhm. But this program is about and for small business. If you have 20 to 100 employees, uh, it to me it's you're putting in all of these things for remote. Yet the best way to really do things is uh, being together. Uh, 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 what are some of the guidelines that you tell people when they try to build an organization one way or the other, or what is now happening, the meld organization?
I think that the labor market is really kind of driving the answer to that question. I mean, ultimately, what we're finding is there are certain skill sets that are needed, and those particular individuals may or may not be comfortable coming into an office setting, and or they might not just be available. So, for example, what I'm getting at here is, there are employees, let's say, from a finance background, and maybe within your business, you need someone who's an accountant, or you might need some folks who are able to help you manage, your finance department or your finance area of your business. And, those individuals, let's just say, you're having a hard time hiring for that role. Those particular individuals are not people who necessarily need to be present and physically on site in your business every single day. And if you consider a remote candidate to fill that position, you're going to open up your pool pretty broadly. Because if you're in, let's say, I'm in Pittsburgh, if you're in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and you're unable to find the right kind of talent to come into your office every day, if I open up the pool to remote or virtual candidates, I now have, I have the pick of the litter across the country, really, if you think about it. So I think it really depends upon what skill sets you're looking for, what positions you're trying to fill. Are the people who are talented and qualified for those positions, is it better to get those people outside of the local area where your business is located? Or does it make sense to have someone, on site every day? Like those who might be supervising or managing teams that are, working on site. I mean, maybe it's material handlers that are working in a distribution center or whatnot. Yes, makes perfect sense to hire someone who's on site. But that accounting finance example, it might behoove you to hire someone who is sitting, across the country because they have the skill set you want, and there's not a real need for you to be present and with the rest of the team on a daily basis. So I think it varies, and I would encourage business owners, small businesses to really kind of think about that and assess that every time they're considering what next step they're going to make when they're planning out their workforce strategy.
Well, the small business tend to be service business, and the service business really requires the hands-on touch. So that's what I've been told by many people. We took a tour across several states over the holidays to talk to small businesses, and their primary concern is how do they keep the velvet touch between themselves and their customers, whether it's a bagel shop or um, uh, a curtain making company.
Mhm.
They're all saying the same thing, that their employees don't want to come into the office. Um, I just saw today that New Jersey had a record number of cases of Omicron. It's anyway. We have just a few minutes left, so we always ask our guests, what would you like to talk about and leave our audience with?
I think that in terms of final thoughts, I mean, I really, would like to kind of share that I think right now is a very critical point in time in our labor market. And I know that, as now a small business owner myself, I can, completely understand the challenges that, many employers are faced with. And I would encourage each small business owner, to really get creative and assess their processes, how they're currently doing things, and not necessarily continue to do them the same way that they've been doing them, but look a little bit more creatively at how they can continue to build their business within the amount of money that they have scheduled for that particular process, but also think about how can I continue to evolve my business so that I can keep pace with the competitive labor market that we are faced with. And that might mean that in some cases, some employees might need to work from home. And that might mean that, some people who leave your company, perhaps they don't need to be replaced. Perhaps you can, enhance a process or automate a process that makes it easier for you to still conduct business without replacing them. I think it's really just a really interesting time. And it's a really great time as a small business owner to get creative about how to manage your business and how to think ahead as we continue to evolve in the workplace.
Hmm. Laura, now how do you pronounce your last name? I sometimes butcher it. Winans? Did I pronounce it right?
It's Winans. You got it right in the
Wine.
beginning. It's
Okay.
Winans. Mhm.
Okay. I'm going to ask you another question, which is somewhat political, but how do you compete against the fact that you could get a stay home and make more money than if you came to work? How do you motivate people to go to work rather than sit home?
Well, I think that's interesting because, a lot of chatter in the beginning of the pandemic was that, oh, unemployment benefits are so much higher. That's why people don't want to come back into work. And while I think that for a small subset of the population, that might be true, but I think ultimately what's keeping people out of the labor market is we've got, a lot of folks that may have accelerated their retirement. We have folks that are primary caregivers, whether it be for parents, disabled family members, or children. And we also have, individuals with chronic conditions that are not necessarily comfortable with getting back into the workplace until, the pandemic subsides, or until they're fully vaccinated, or until others around them are fully vaccinated. So I think there's a lot of different factors at play here. So I think it's going to take a lot of work to drive people back into the labor market, because the latest numbers are showing that we've had approximately 4.5 to 5 million people leave the labor market altogether. And I think those folks aren't just hanging out at home because they're making money off of unemployment. I think there's a lot of other factors at play, and I think that the government, as well as business owners, are going to just simply need to be able to support the efforts that we're trying to accomplish here with managing this pandemic in an effective way, whatever that looks like, based upon whatever your beliefs are. It's a fact of the matter. There are people who are uncomfortable or cannot, because of other factors, they're just unable to get into their business, or into their office, or to the company that they used to work for. So unfortunately, it's a problem we're having to deal with, and just get creative with how we can work around it.
Okay, on that, Laura Winans, I say thank you for a really wonderful time together. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Dawn.